life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Bern, it looks like we have a mystery guest here today.
Yeah.
I'm certainly excited to find out a little bit more about him.
Well, I have been for several days, too. His name is Phil Aaron. Let's get that straightened up. That's A-A-R-O-N. And the reason he's here is that some weeks ago, I got introduced to a company that's doing some extraordinary and exciting things, and he was coming into town for a seminar, and I thought, well, gee, maybe we could get him on the show before and after this week, and hopefully next, if he pulls this off. You know how that goes. But Phil is a co-contributor, a cohort. In other words, he's a national, international speaker. He's influenced, I'm certain, the lives of thousands, and he'd have to tell us how many. The information that we were exposed to and expect to be exposed to in the next few days is intensive and pretty thorough. And so I'm excited about some of the things we might be able to cover if given enough time in 2 half-hour segments. Atlanta, Georgia, your home. Beautiful city. I had some offices down there, back in 70, 71, and it was a good town then, and I can't even imagine how it must have expanded since. In the seminar that I saw so far, you talked pretty readily about what a limitless shopping spree for your daughter. You talked about sailboats, and you talked about purchasing a huge ranch in Montana to accommodate children to come and learn, to grow, to develop. That would indicate that you do rather well. I mean, financially, you're fairly stable, I would think. And I'm just curious, you know, whenever you encounter people that are that way, you think, well, he was born with a silver spoon, he's always had it well. Is that the case with you?
No, not at all. In fact, my mother told me, if you don't expect too much out of people, you won't be disappointed by the results. So I grew up and got an education and found out that the college educated me to work for someone else, which I did, which was the state of Georgia. Of course, I called it the state of confusion because I was the head of the local chapter. So I worked there for several years and just had a yearning in my heart, and began to realize as a new father that I wanted to have a little better direction in my life.
You started a quest, evidently, for information that would make a difference. Where did you find it? Did you find it in books or seminars or tapes, or, I mean, something must have been the stimulus? Well,
I tried that, Bern. I went to seminars, I read different things, and for somehow I wasn't emotionally ready to really accept what was going to happen. I think we all have to be ready for an opportunity, and although I talked the game and act like I wanted to do something better with my life, I think deep down I didn't want to take the risk. I didn't want to really try, so I went through the motions. And I played one day, someday type music. I thought I was going to have it one day, someday, and it was something I had to prepare for in the near future, not right now, and take the action.
What was the primary motivation, I mean, that drove you to look for answers and consider change?
Well, it was financial. I mean, here I was a brand new father, and I don't know if anybody's ever been there, but one thing, you look at things a lot differently. I felt like with my wife and I, we could kind of get through, you know, and we could have beans and rice or whatever. But when I had a brand new baby daughter here, I saw myself more as a provider. I saw myself as having to make a decision to do a little better for her. It is amazing that we can't sacrifice for ourselves. We have to do it for someone else. And that's really what happened to me. I got started looking around, and things started kind of moving from there.
If we're in this business, we never stop preparing. But how long have you been preparing and practicing? How long have you been speaking and communicating to groups about this type of thing that we talk about here on the show?
Well, going on now about almost 20 years now.
20 years.
So we've been working on that. So and it wasn't, to start out, it wasn't to do that at all. In fact, that was my biggest fear, was public speaking, or I called it public peaking because I couldn't put 2 words together. So, and the fear of heights. And when you become a new father, the thing that hit me right between the eyes that you begin to look at is you pass on your strengths to your children as well as your weaknesses. And I didn't want to talk about the weakness part of it. So once again, I did that to be better for her.
And what were some of the things that you did?
Well, the first thing we did was I went over to Kill Devil Ridge in North Carolina, went hang gliding. Made about 8 trips off a 82-foot hill, and my life passed in front of my eyes, and I invented new words, and it scared me to death, but I got through it. I lived, you know, obviously. And I did a first presentation to a Rotary group, and they didn't usher me out. So I said, well, this is, you know, it's a start.
You survived.
I survived, contrary to popular belief.
How did you conduct your research to prepare yourself to go out and make a difference? I mean, where did you get your information, and how did you develop it, and how long did it take you?
Well, my formal education was psychology. In fact, I was going to be a shrink, and I kind of began moving away from that. I took some towards my master's studies, and it tended to get me, I had a tendency to analyze things a little too much and try to figure out how they wouldn't work before I got started. The main thrust that pushed me forward, once again, was just to be a better person for my child. And then as I gained my self-confidence, I didn't mind being a better person for myself.
As a speaker now, could you agree, although it's a little bit, I'm tentative to say it, but my experience is that a lot of our experts, psychologists, psychiatrists, and what have you, tend to complicate things to justify their existence.
Oh, that's true.
It's almost like if they can keep us confused, they can keep themselves busy.
That's very true. And that's a thing that I saw right off the bat. I had a privilege to travel a little bit and do some seminars and watch these other people. I tried to emulate what they were doing, and I found out that they reinvent words. They say, well, this is not goals, I call this something else, and it confuses people. But the thrust of all this, if you look at it, is they take a break every 50 minutes to sell their tapes. So they want to give you just enough information to keep you hungry, but not enough to satiate your desire, so you can be dependent basically on where they're going.
Do you have a sense after these years, you're 20 years now, and you've spoken, do you have a favorite mentor? Do you have someone who got you started, and people now that you look to as a, you know?
I think one of the people in the very beginning was a fellow that took me under his wing, was a blind man. He was blind at 19 years old. He had retinitis pigmentosa, and he began to be gradually, little by little, blind at that point. And he'd been speaking for 20 years at that time. So we traveled together, and I learned quite a bit about him. He had the most incredible ability to feel people, and he taught me how to do that. He taught me how to read a room. He taught me how to feel it, how to feel the emotion, and how to move with what their demands are. So I was trained to have a lot of spontaneity in what I did, and which is good because I didn't have to rely on overheads or notes or anything like that.
That's fascinating. I know one of the things that we have to be careful of is the parroting or the re-articulating of the same information over and over if it's not being productive. The reason I brought the dictionary this evening, I wanted to share this with you in the event that you haven't heard it before. This is a American Heritage dictionary. And quite frequently I've mentioned this, but I wanted to bring this as a certification. Some years ago, a semanticist had contracted, according to this essay, with a cartoonist to draw a picture of a bear in a phone booth. He was making a phone call, and there was a car sitting outside with a man sitting in it with a certain discerning look on his face. And they asked 25 speakers to describe, and writers, articulate people, to describe what was happening in that picture. Okay, and because of the English language and what it affords us, everyone wrote a different sentence, but they all said the same thing. Just to illustrate, one said a bear is occupying a telephone booth while a tourist impatiently waits in line. Okay, a man who was driving along the road has stopped and is waiting impatiently for the grizzly bear to finish using the public phone. In other words, every sentence said the same thing. What they did was to take those words, the vocabulary that had been employed, and taking into account the grammatical factors, put it in a computer and permuted the number of grammatically correct sentences that could be written with the words that had been used. Am I making myself clear? Yeah. And kind of fascinating. I mean, I want to read it because it's just astounding. 19.8 billion sentences could be written just with those words, and all say the same thing, and all be grammatically correct. Isn't that awesome? Especially when you think, they say here, the number of seconds in a century is 3.2 billion. In other words, I computed that out, that if you could say a sentence a second, you know, for 1,200 years, you wouldn't complete defining what was happening in that picture. And so I think we have to be really careful, you know what I mean, of what we're saying, and that we're not parroting the same thing over and over if it's not working. See, I think we might have discussed this the other day, that my concern is that after all these centuries, and by the way, in the last half century, the self-improvement industry, what you and I do, has become major, billion-dollar industry. And yet we're still getting 80-20, 90-10, that kind of thing. And so we go, whoa, we have to be careful what we're saying here. And is this really working? You've heard, I know, in fact, I've heard you mention that if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to get the same results. And that's called, what is it? Insanity? I call it inanity, but that's another issue. But so what are you doing to research to find new dimensions that would make it, I don't know, instead of 90-10, 90-20, 90-30, 90-40?
One of the things that we found out, Carl, my partner Carl and I were very curious about how things worked. And I was always curious about, I'd go up and talk to people and say, if you had to do it over again, what would you change? What got you here? And through all that, we found a couple of things that really struck a chord with me. Number one is that the majority of the people have subconsciously accepted the fact their life's not going to get any better. Right. And if they've done that, they go through the same process, the same job, the same different relationships that they have. They go through the same process. They can read anything. They can attend anybody's seminar. But if they're sitting there with the fact that they've lost their faith, and they don't believe their life's going to get any better, and they've subconsciously accepted that, and they're basically mentally treading water, you could put miracles in front of them, and you put the Bible in front of them, and still they're not able to understand how it's going to affect them in their life. Another important factor is the fact that most people's earnings have caught up with their personal growth. In other words, they don't realize that they can grow beyond where they are. And to many of them, they think they could earn beyond that. So they go 2 or 3 jobs and try different things like that, but yet not ever finding out where they're going. So the potential is there, as you said. The key that I've seen is that people have just about psychologically given up the ship even before they started. They lost their faith, they lost their belief in what they can do as far as to accomplish things.
Why is that? Have you determined? Or?
Well, there's a lot of things, in fact. I mean, we look at where we are, look at the faith we have as a kid. I mean, now when my daughter Brooke was about 5 years old, I'd say, Brooke, she'd go, what? Because she wants to believe. And I'd say, Brooke, she'd say, what, Daddy? I said, don't look now, but there's a gorilla in the soup pot in the kitchen. And she goes, really? And I said, don't open the soup pot now because he'll get out. And I let her hang on that for about 10 minutes. She goes in, opens the soup pot. I hear it rattling. She comes back and she goes, Daddy, he wasn't in the soup pot. I said, he's in the closet. She goes, really? She'll do that all day. We have an incredible faith. But then we get down the road and we start disbelieving in what we can do. We lose that when we find out about the tooth fairy. I was just kidding about the tooth fairy.
Oh.
Yeah, because there is a tooth fairy. Surely there must be.
That's true.
I sure need one. I had an abscess the other day, and I'm praying, there's a tooth fairy.
Well, my son came up to me the other day, and he says, you're going to pay me now, or you're going to make me wait till I go to bed.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I was trying to think, you covered a lot on goals the other day, and we were talking, and you led from goals into affirmations, which are terribly important. And you said something that you did in affirmations, this trip home. Would you talk about that for a second so that these people get an idea of what we're talking about when we say affirmations?
I had this incredible battle in my mind because all these thoughts, have you ever sung a jingle, a commercial or whatever, and you couldn't get it out of your mind? And I set a goal, and my goal was to dominate my subconscious and conscious mind for an hour. That means that everything I was going to put into it, I was in total control of. Now that sounds pretty simple. And I ironically had an hour trip. I drove outside of Atlanta. I had an hour to go back home. So I started repeating one of my favorite affirmations, which is every day and in every way I'm getting better and better. And I would repeat it again and again and again, every day and in every way I'm getting better and better. Fortunately, I was driving at night, so no one saw me talk to myself. And it took me 13 trips. I mean, somebody would pull out in front of me, and I said, every day and every way I'm going to kill this guy. And I would have to, the rules were I'd have to stop. And one time I got right into the street before where I lived. And I thought I had it. I eased up off of doing it, and I broke the chain. So I was determined to do it. And sure enough, it took the 13th trip. And I pulled in, turned the car off, was still doing my affirmations. And I shut the car off and stepped out of the vehicle. And for the first time in my life, I had a power over my subconscious thought of what I could put into my head. And it doesn't sound like that hard of a thing to do, but most people have never guided their subconscious mind in one positive direction for an hour. And I had the residual effect on that for 2 or 3, 4 days afterwards. It was the most powerful thing I had experienced up to that point.
Yeah, not easy because the subconscious mind will resist and fight that off. It wants to stay in control.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Especially if you never guided it.
And I had an experience in 1957 where necessity compelled me to get serious. And I picked up some information, and I created an affirmation that I can be, that I will be, and that I am the top field counselor in the United States. And that time was with Alcoa. They had 1,200, about 1,500 managers, and I started at 1,200th. It was pretty far down the line. And I started these affirmations, and I absorbed my day, in the car, in the shower, shaving. But I don't think I ever made it a straight hour, without getting interrupted, because that didn't occur to me. But I do believe I probably said that 10,000 times a day. Just over and over and over again. And within 90 days, I was #1. And you have to put some credit to that, because everyone that we've encountered, certainly that I've encountered, who have really employed their mind, their conscious mind that way, has attained extraordinary results. But it's a lot of effort to take command of your thinking, because typically what we perceive as thought is not thought at all. It's a malaise of thought that's coming from the subconscious mind, keeping you busy so you don't get these fancy ideas.
Yes, that's right.
About moving on and being successful and all that kind of stuff. Gina, what's popping into your mind? You got any questions for Philip while he's here?
Well, actually, I'd like to know a little bit more about some of the seminars that you do teach and who you address.
Well, we decided a long time ago, and when we first started producing seminars, that if a family doesn't grow together, it's going to grow separate. And I had a big problem seeing people who basically attended seminars, mainly hosted by corporations. And the male or the female that went and saw it would get so fired up, they get so excited, and they come home to their spouse, to their husband or their wife, and they would say, "That's great, honey, why don't you take out the trash now," or whatever. And what I found out is something very good and something very positive required them to grow separate. Yet marriages are over 50% divorce, and out here in California, you're talking in the heavy 65 percentile. So why not build a seminar that involves the whole family, that involves communication skills? Why should goal setting be just for corporations? Why can't it be for relationships? Why can't it be for the kids, to be able to learn how to do that? So we boil things down to the very hard, simple truths. Didn't put any attachment to it like a corporate arena was, and put the family together. So we brought them all in there together. And so what we found out happening is the wife would bring her husband, and she'd come up and say, "Fix him. I brought him here. Now I've been married to him for 30 years. Now you fix him." And everybody's trying to fix the other person, so it's great. And they find out they obviously get fixed themselves. So once again, the family has to go together, or it's going to grow separately. And we're one of the very few companies that focuses all the way around to be able to do that.
That's great. So you speak internationally and in the States? And
well, I've spoken more in the States, but I've spoken out of the country as well.
That's great.
Gina, he's involved in a project too of acquiring how many acres?
A little less than 4,000.
4,000 acres in Montana. They're going to construct this huge house. A lodge?
It's a training center, yeah.
Training center.
For who?
For families, for kids. We're going to do a lot of things. It's going to be a working ranch, for one thing. I have this thing about trout fishing, and they call my name. I can go down there, it's near the Yellowstone Park, and I can hear them call my name, so I have to go down there. So we decided to get pretty close, and my partner, Carl Watson, and myself, with our company Touchstone, are building a training center. We will be hosting and sponsoring kids there, needy kids, inner city kids, handicapped kids. They will go there either for a week as far as a summer camp to build their self-esteem. Some will actually live there on the ranch, work there, and be involved in the school system there. And we'll do a lot of training there. It'll be retreats for couples and things like that.
So you will have a program for families to actually come and spend a week together and get reconnected and learn some skills for communicating and that's
with
wonderful.
A lot of interactive factors, and we give the young children an option to be able to move on into a youth-directed program, while the couples can move on into a couple-directed program, and we put them back together at the end of the week. So it's something we've been dreaming about for a long time, and we're right in the process of negotiating, and I really feel like it's going to come down for us real soon.
Well, tell me, in all your experience and many years of teaching, and you must have learned a lot from your audience as well as them learning a lot from you.
Oh, definitely.
It seems like, what are some of the most common situations that you find people have to deal with and struggle with, and what is your answer?
I think one of the biggest things is denial. We run into, there's no middle range here. There's either people who are looking for some personal growth in their life, and there's people who deny it. There's nothing in the middle. And many times when you talk about that, it's almost an automatic, well, I'm okay. Well, they'll say, what do you do, Phil? I said, I'm in the personal growth industry. Well, I'm okay. I attended a seminar. I read a book one time. And I said, yeah, well, I ate a meal today, and I plan on with a little bit of luck to eat again. And people don't understand to feed their brains the same way. So many of them come into our seminars, they're curious, but there's a certain part of denial protecting themselves, acting as if, oh yeah, I've heard that before. Hearing it before has nothing to do with it. It's putting it to use. That's what you were bringing up earlier, is putting it to use. You can read all of these things and not taking the actions, fearing to risk is what we run into.
So is fear then the better part of denial?
Oh yes, yes. Yes.
And then do you find that with people who actually do attend your seminars that there's a reluctance to put those things into action?
It's very easy. We call them seminar puppies. It's real easy to carry it to go to 15 seminars and listen and nod and take notes and be there and pat everybody on the back and give them a good data boy and then go out and go right back with their life, because that's the process where you have to take it out and risk it. And it's real passive to sit and take notes. It's real passive to
it makes you feel all warm and fuzzy.
Oh yeah, it's easy to do that in that environment. But the hardest part is to go out there and take it out in their lives. And I think a person has to move, either be inspired enough or motivated enough or fed up enough. And that part, I was fed up enough. I mean, I wasn't inspired at all. I was fed up. I didn't want to go any further with where I was.
Do you find that being fed up or being desperate or really reaching the end of your rope is one of the more powerful forms of...
If the timing's right. Sometimes we're a little insane about it, and we kind of operate out of desperation. I've seen people come in and say, okay, I'll give you 2 hours, fix me. And I'm saying, give me a break, you know.
Took 20 years to get you this way.
Yeah, how can we, that's what we talked about. How can we do this in a couple of hours? But the thing is that many people only rely on personal growth like a parachute. I mean, they act like it's already there, but during a crisis, they're going to want to have it. And that's like a person that gets instant religion. You know, like the plane starts going down, he starts praying. And sometimes when he does that, I feel like the lines are busy. You know, he has to do that the rest of his life, not just in an emergency. And this is a lifestyle. This is not anything that carries you through a crisis. Once it's put there, once you can control your subconscious mind, it's like keeping that glass full. And once you have it full, it doesn't create a magnetic influence to attract anything else into it that you don't want, like other people's commercials or other thoughts, as you were talking, Vern.
So I'm assuming then that you give these people some specific skills and activities to practice that they can develop.
Very, very much so. The first thing we do is find out what they want. And usually what they want is not really what they want at all. Many people can't even define what they want. We tell them, if somebody gave you an extra $50,000 to $100,000, what do you want? And they don't really know. They knew what they wanted when they were 6 years old. They had a Christmas list a mile long. They started selling their folks before the summer got through. And we get to be adults, we get lulled into complacency, and we don't know what we want.
Why don't we know?
Because we sold ourselves out to our desires and our dreams. Many people will say, I want to pay off my bills. I said, that doesn't count. You already bought that. This is what you want. What do you want? And then we start playing with them a little bit and say, what if somebody gave you $100,000 and said you have, and women specifically, mothers, they'll spend it on their children. And they'll say, no, this is for you. Well, I got to spend it on my child to make her better. I said, no, you don't understand. You'll be better if you spend it on yourself.
And so will she.
That's true. That's true. Children want parents to be happy.
I have a question for you, because someone asked me this the other day. Why is it, this was a question a man asked me, why is it that it's so often that we put our children before our partners? I think women have a real tendency to put their children before their partners. But I think men do too sometimes.
I can give you the Reader's Digest version here. So, well, they're a lot more cuddly. A child, you've been married to the fellow for several years, and you got this young, beautiful little accepting thing about that big that does nothing but smile. And she's very accepting, very lovable, and it's very easy for that mother to transform that love. I went through that in our relationship. I had to actually cook my own meals there. I said, well, this, honey, I'm glad you're home stuff. And, you know, so I had to learn to go through that. But it's a lot more of an accepting process. And many times, obviously, a mother, as well as dads, but mothers want to be a better parent. So they do that. They give that to their child again and again and again. And you're only renting these little things for about 17 or 18 years. The lease runs out. They're gone.
Right.
And you have this huge house that's already paid for and 9 bedrooms and can't find dad. He's there changing channels.
I do think there's a natural tendency to do that, and it's a primal thing to do. You know, it's just that we forget that we're socioeconomic supranatural entities.
That's true.
You know, we get caught in the nurturance and propagation, and I think that diverts from the mate. Because that, after a while, on a primal level, that's all they're there for. You know what I mean? Is to keep off the the savage beast and to provide and to be there when we're ready to make another child. You know what I mean? But that's not the way it is now. in a socioeconomic environment, I mean, you're still going to be together when that child is long gone, like yours has left the nest.
That's right.
Do you think we also have very different expectations from a partner than from a child? I mean,
That's true.
it's easy to say, well, you're supposed to do this and this and this and this, and I expect you to function at this level and give to me. I think that's one of the biggest things we find as a difference between partners and children is most parents come into that relationship with a child expecting to be the one who's doing all the giving, and expect that child to be a recipient. But when we come into a partner relationship, we expect them to fill us up and provide all of our needs, and anytime they're not doing what we think, they're
naughty.
in the doghouse.
Yeah. Well, that child couldn't quantify the love either. The child's always there to accept it. It's a lot easier to give that way than the other.
Yeah.
You just opened a little bucket of worms that I want him to address if you'll stay for next week's show.
Be glad to.
You're going to come back for next week because he addressed a situation where he really wanted his wife to make some changes and to convey how you went about doing that. Okay, but in the meantime, we have to kind of begin to wind this thing down and let our audience know that we're talking to Phil Aaron with Touchstone and a Path of Eagles. I hear. What is that about?
Path of Eagles is our ranch,
Okay,
and that's the
ranch.
programs that we offer. And we originally decided to have the Path of Eagles at the ranch, but we also offer those programs out here here in California and different places as well.
I would think that Californians would be familiar with Touchstone, but I find that a lot aren't. Do you mind describing that before we leave?
Of the terminology of Touchstone? Many, many years back in the early 1800s, people measured gold with a black stone, and they would rub the gold across the stone, and it would determine the quality of that stone as to how they rubbed it on there. So we took on that name because it's a measure of quality. It's a measure of how things work and the quality of how that goes.
It's a standard that's established, and it's a good name. This has been Life Talk, one word, and if people would like to call and find out more about Phil and what he's doing and the ranch, and you could use all the help you can get on that.
Sure could.
They can call 1-800-661-3490, or if they're here in the 916 area, they can call 366-8749. And it's time for me to have to say, this is Phil Aaron, I'm Bern
Moses.
Thank you, and you're Gina Fitt, and we appreciate you.
Thanks, Bern.
Thank you.